What's up, everybody? I have in front of me here today something I'm pretty excited about. Another TORQ Locker. This one is going in my rear axle, the Chrysler 8 1/4 29 spline rear that came in my 2001 XJ. And the TORQ Locker, as you might have seen in my front axle, is a really simple lunchbox style locker. In fact, it's the simplest lunchbox style locker that you can buy. It is 100% made in the USA, and it is really simple to install, as well as simple in terms of the number of parts that go into it and the design here. Yeah, there are a lot of different options out there for the 8 1/4 axle, but this is the first one coming from TORQ, and I have a TORQ Locker in the Dana 30 up front, which I've been extremely happy with. The stub shafts that I'm running, not quite so happy with those, but the locker itself has performed flawlessly. It has had no damage to it. The two times now that I have snapped a stub shaft in that, which I am blaming on, hoping to blame on the fact that I have been open diff in the rear. So what is a lunchbox locker? In case you're not familiar, it is just a locker that is essentially only a spider gear replacement. So the carrier of the locker is not changed. A full carrier locker, like a selectable, something like an ARB or an aux locker, that replaces your entire carrier. So that is where your cross shaft goes in, and this just replaces your spider gears. Some of those other designs from Aussie or Spartan, they use these little dowel pins that go in, and they're really about the size of these springs. There's no pins. The pins are essentially these, socket and pocket design of this. The beauty of the TORQ Locker is that they've made it that you can install this without even having to pull the carrier completely out of the Jeep, as I'm going to show you, and just pull your shafts, pull your center pin, your cross shaft, and pull your spider gears and swap them out for these pieces. Let's get started on the install, and then in a little bit after the install, I'm going to drive this in a bunch of different conditions, off-roading, and if you also follow me on Instagram at BleepinJeep, I'll be sure to give my thoughts on how this performs throughout the winter as we're headed into the snowier winter months, and see how I kind of feel about it in snow and ice and some of the different conditions that are going to be presented over the next couple months. So the real major difference between the TORQ Locker install that I just did on the Dana 30 and this 8 1/4 is that the 8 1/4 is a C-clip axle. You can pull that pin out completely, make sure it stays clean, and now you pull out the cross shaft here. And if you're not familiar with how a C-clip axle comes apart, what you need to do at this point is to just press in on the ends of the axles out at the wheel, and the C-clip can fall out then. So that's your C-clip. Two of those, one on either axle, and then we don't need to pull the axle out completely. Just needs to come out enough to where you can get that spider gear out. Okay, with the axle shafts pushed out far enough, now the next thing that you need to do to get the spider gears out is to just rotate them independent of the carrier, and the gears will just kind of fall out. So those are the idlers, and then the splined axle ones. Probably best to get the one opposite the ring gear first and pull that out, and if there's thrust washers on them, you want to make sure that you have those along with it, and best to keep those identified as the side that they came from. That's all that needs to be removed. Just really the cross shaft, which goes back in, and the spider gears. So at this point, it doesn't matter which side is which for the TORQ Locker pieces. There's no ring gear side. That's just for parts that are worn in together. So all I want to do to get started here is to just put just a real light coating of like a medium duty grease, something a little bit sticky, just a little something here to help hold these pieces together. And also I'm going to go ahead and apply it to the thrust washer side of this. Pulling this thrust washer, the only face that's going to matter is the face that is touching the carrier. So pulling that straight up and then setting it right straight down onto the new TORQ Locker piece. So I'll do this to both halves, and I'm just keeping them left and right for ring gear, non-ring gear, so that I don't mix things up. And down. Alright, so I've got my two halves of the TORQ Locker ready to put into the carrier. The only other part to the TORQ Locker is those springs. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the ring gear side and then the non-ring gear side. You can see that I pushed the axle shaft in so that it's engaging the splines. And now I'll just put the other side in the same exact way. With this machined slot facing out towards you, and I'm not sure I want that axle all the way out. I should be able to see the groove where the C-clip goes right through that window. Alright, you can kind of roll the C-clip to where it's at the point that gravity is holding it where it should be. And now, it's going to be the point where I need to get these teeth all lined up and get a spring in here. I want to make sure that those two sides are pretty well aligned. The spring pocket. Like that spring was a lot easier than it was on the Pima 30. Okay, that's one side. Okay. I believe that's fully seated. Get a little screwdriver to double check. That should be it. Yeah, as long as you're past that little groove. Alright, so final step here is installing the cross shaft. Alright, so my hole for the bolt is here, hole for the cross shaft is here. And I'm heading an axle. Oh, there we go. There we go. Alright, both axle shafts are out where they belong. Beautiful. Alright. Crank this bolt down here. Now that everything's installed, it is a good idea, as their instructions say, to check the gap here. Got my feeler gauge here set to 0.165. The spec is between 145 and 175, so kind of somewhere in the middle towards the more open side. And these are worn thrust washers, and that is about as tight as I would call exactly 165. So that is definitely in spec, and I'll just spin it and check the other side to make sure. But that's where you want to check it, near the spring, not back in the pockets there. That's a little looser. Yeah, exact same over here, as you would expect. So I'm ready to clean this out. I'm just going to spray some brake cleaner, bolt the diff cover back on, and we can fill her up with oil. It's a rainy morning. Just got the TORQ Locker installed last night, and I'm guessing this is going to be a pretty good proving grounds. Things aren't as wet as they were like an hour ago, but it is still kind of a misty drizzle. The roads are soaking wet, and it's been about 3 weeks since we had rain, so things should be a little extra oily and slippery here. So let's see how it does. I'm headed into some twisty, windy backcountry roads and do some accelerations out of turns and things like that to see how this does. A little bit more, I guess, throttle driven steering, you could say. Nothing scary, just a tiny little thing that I've noticed so far. Seems like, you know, just a little twitch of the throttle, and it does affect just how the Jeep's tracking. That's all I'll say. It's not really a concern or a problem, it's just something I noticed. There's a turn, wet, leafy turn that I definitely would have broken my inside tire loose on that normally. Hard second gear pull up over a hill crest there. No tires broken loose. Baby deer. Normal acceleration. Acting up around 3,200 RPM per shift. Okay, that was something that probably would have happened regardless. That took me by surprise. A little bit of fishtail action going on there. Totally my fault. But it definitely was accentuated a little bit by having both wheels spinning. Alright, well, that was a lot of fun. Really behaved very well. I mean, it's one of those things. You know, the sort of disclaimer is understand that it's there, know your vehicle, and just, you know, constantly be aware that the driving characteristics of your Jeep with this locker in there are going to be a little different. I'm going to be trying this out tomorrow in rocks and mud and dirt. So far, I'm really happy with the driving characteristics on road. Starting right off with some mud.
That was solid. So successful trail run today. Saw a lot of really wet, slimy rocks. Nothing super like goopy, but everything was, you know, any dirt was mud and any rocks were slippery. So it was definitely a ideal test environment for traction. Super happy with how everything went. I tried to keep it two-wheel drive. There were some really tight climbs with some rocks. Really happy with how it performed. There was definitely one spot that I would not have made it through without having the rear locked. I got the front right up and over, and then I just sat there trying to get the rear tires to climb, and had to kind of maneuver to get over this obstacle. And Mark, having slightly less aggressive tires than what I have, definitely had a little bit more of a hard time with it, even though he's also fully locked with ARBs. So yeah, I mean, really couldn't be happier with the performance. Didn't feel like it really affected my turning. Didn't feel like there were any turns that, you know, I had to really negotiate any more difficult than they would have been otherwise. So yeah, I mean, really, I don't know what else you could want in a lunchbox locker. Never really felt it slip or heard it pop or ratcheting or any of that. So super great product on the trails, and yeah, definitely driving on the dry roads today. I am noticing that it grips a lot more than it was in the wet roads yesterday. So yeah, as I said on the wet roads review, you just got to be mindful that it's there. It's not not the kind of thing that's going to just sneak up and cause a rollover or something crazy, but it is, you know, you kind of think, oh, why did the Jeep respond that way? Oh yeah, because I was on the acceleration and the rear is locked. So it's just got to kind of affect your driving habits a little bit. Other than that, it really is there when you need it, and you can kind of forget about it otherwise.